Hi, this is Dr. Alana James, and this is a fairly quick video that will real fast overview the checklists. But I'm doing this with the recommendation that the first thing you do is that you download the PDF that has these elements. And then you may come back to the video if you need greater understanding of any particular set, but the checklists are all included in the PDF. So with that, we'll get started. Our quotes for today is that trust is built with consistency. Consistency is the first and foremost thing you have to put together when you're preparing your final documentation for your graduate work. You have to have something that is the same and builds a strong story from beginning to end. And Bruce Springsteen reminds us that getting an audience is hard, sustaining an audience is hard. It demands consistency of thought, of purpose, and of action over a long period of time. And that's as true for an academic as it is for a musician. So our goal for this is to provide you some easy checklists that help you consistently hit the mark with your final dissertation or thesis. And through these slides, I'll talk about what makes consistency hard, give you a checklist for your intro lit methodology sections, whatever they look like, short or long, and the same for results, findings, discussion, and the end game, and then I'll finish with some resources that you can find elsewhere that will make this easier for you. So what makes consistency hard? Well, basically because whatever you have done, you've done it over a period of time, and therefore your thoughts have changed as you've gone forward, and the words, most specifically the words you use to put to those thoughts, have likely evolved. Therefore, anything that you wrote more than a month or two ago probably has some slight changes in it, and if you don't catch those before examiners look at them, they will catch them, and it will raise questions, and that's not what you want at your end game. Also, you may have developed some ideas in response to peer review. Those people may have been people who had power over you, and so you therefore had to do what they wanted you to do, or they might have just been good ideas, etc. Anyway, watch out for the too many cooks spoil the pot syndrome, where you have too many ideas and they're not all yours. So what to do about them? Well, you need to take control. You should read your work out loud, and you should ensure that it's written in your voice. And now let's go into what do we have to do for intro lit methodology. Well, before you start, make sure that you're on target with your university guidelines, that you're writing to a template that meets those guidelines, including the style, APA, Harvard, whatever it is that you're writing to. And you need to have read whatever you're talking about widely, because you're going to have to support your ideas in a big way. And make sure that you've rewritten everything in your own words so that you're safe on unintentional plagiarism, and that any key quotations have their page numbers. Once you've got those things together and you've thought it through about the importance and the theories behind your work, you're ready to write. So then you start your introduction. The purpose of your introduction is to build significance. As you've seen on the checklist, you want to make sure that you've written your literature and your methodology before you write your introduction. Put off those first words, even though you know you're going to have to grab your reader a certain way. Put that off or write it down, but intend to rewrite, because the later sections will change the earlier ones. Be sure you always keep track of the 2 or 3 most important ideas, and make sure that those are always what is highlighted. It's so easy to get off on some stray path and lose your reader. This means that you have studied argumentation, and that you've laid out a logic for yourself. And if you haven't, there are places that you can go within the professional development system that we have that can help you with that. You feel confident. Write when you're confident, and that you're clear about the significance of your work to the people who will be reading it. Keep those things in your mind as you write. And then as you go along, pay attention to the first sentence in each section. Grab your reader's attention with strong, clear, short sentences, and give them enough information so they're comfortable with their topic. Once you've done all those things, I hope that you've talked to a lot of other people about what you're doing, so that you have some idea of where your ideas break down and where people question you, because those are the same places your reader will question you. And you've identified any definitions or words that you may use that are awkward for your reader, and you've got them in a list so that they can find them in your document. Now, your work has to be based on the literature of your field. That's where you set the stage for everything you do. Hopefully you've read some other theses and you've analyzed how they've done the literature and methodology and how those things correspond with each other. And because you don't want to add so much to your literature that it doesn't have anything to do with what you're actually doing. Once you think about your literature, you realize that it's an analysis, a synthesis, an interpretation, and a critical analysis. Those are four very different kinds of points of view, so you'll want to plot where you're going to use those strategies. And again, there are a lot more resources that you can have that'll help you figure out those things if they're not making sense to you. Then you lay out your headings and you know what you're going to be doing under each one. You hopefully are relying on a system that is a spreadsheet or a bibliographic software or both, where you've outlined your ideas, you know what points you're going to make under each section. You can easily pull in your references and get your reference sheet done at the end. In other words, your organization is strong behind you, and you have a program that helps you. Again, be sure that everything's written in your own language. Once you're set up your reader with your literature, they know what your field thinks about your topics, then you're going to tell them what you're actually doing. Now, this may be the first thing you write, and that's just fine, because it's the heart of your work, is your research. Now, in some topics, some kinds of thesis or dissertation, you may not be doing a strict qualitative or quantitative research. But so think about this section of methodology in terms of what did you study? How did you study it? How was rigor guaranteed? And then what portions of the world did you go to get the data or the sample or whatever it was you studied? And were there ethical considerations with those things? Whether or not yours is work that has a particularly advanced or rigorous methodological stance, all those things still need to be included for your reader. And hopefully then you've looked at how other authors have done this kind of work, and you understand how this section is done, so you have a diagram. If you have a complex set of ideas, draw it out in pictures. If you can put it in a picture, you can write about it with much more clarity, and your reader can understand how it all goes together. Follow a typical way to talk about these issues. This is not a time for you to be innovative with how methodology is discussed. Keep your reader on task, on target, and don't give them something new to think about, because they're examining your work and you want them to just fly right through what you did. So you've got your first bits set up. You've introduced it, you've given us the literature, you've given us the methodology, and now it's time to talk about what you found and how it played out and what your ideas are. They're two very different places of doing that. Your results are what your data showed. They are not your ideas. They are not your outcomes. They're how you hooked your data to your questions. And then your final bits where you discuss your findings in a way that takes it into being your work and what you personally want your reader to take away. So when you're reporting data, don't just dump it on your reader. Nothing worse than pages and pages of either qualitative or quantitative data. Hook it to your questions and to what you were trying to do without interpretation. Just helping the reader understand how what you found went with what you were studying. The reader needs to understand the kind of work you did, how you guaranteed the rigor of that work. All of those things get tied in. And the best things you can do are to find models of other people who have done a similar study. Could be about something completely different, but similar in the way it was done. And then you put out your first efforts following their example. You need to discuss what you did, what the results were, how you checked for errors, in a way that's concise and not overly wordy or overly statistical. Use forms which repeat themselves. So if you do it in one section a certain way, taking us through a logic that starts with the big picture and funnels us into a particular place, follow that same form or logic in the others. That will allow your reader to go quickly through your data. It needs to be readable, so it has to have a pace to it. Jargon gets in the way of that. If you have lots of results, and there's always lots of results, take away the ones that don't get to the places you need us to go, and then set up a pattern, again, using your model. If you you might have a system to how you do this. If this is a full chapter, if this is a dissertation or final thesis for a PhD, you'll introduce what you're going to do, then you'll take us through what you did, and then you'll tell us where we've been. That's just a good system to help your reader stay on track chapter after chapter through a very big document. The final bit, in no matter what the style of thesis or dissertation you're doing, for whatever level, master's or thesis, there will come a place in this document when you are making a point to your reader. And this part is very critical. You want your passion to show. You want it to be backed up by literature. You want to be sure we know where we're going. You want to acknowledge anything that are limiting to your work, so your examiner doesn't say, oh, why didn't you do this later? Takes it off the table for discussion. That again, setting up a pattern of how we're going to go through big ideas to small ideas 1, 2, 3, 4, leading to the big idea. Make sure your reader knows the pattern, take us through it, and then be absolutely positive that your headings, everything adds up to the most important ideas. Even the person who skims through your work needs to be able to quickly pick up why it was important to you and to your field. And of course, if there are recommendations for the future study, how those tie in. It's always good to do any of these documents well versed in what is an argument. Starts with a claim, then you have some general reasons for that claim, data that backs up those reasons, and then the warrant, which says, because of the reason and the support system, I can make this claim and I can prove it to be true. That system of logic is very foundational to any academic writing. So the quicker you get it in your head is, this is the way I think, this is the way I write, the easier it will be to breeze through your final work. We do have some not to miss resources if you're just at the end game and you're looking for other help. You might want to go back through the self-assessments on your university.doctoralnet site. Each one of them ends with the criteria against which those ideas are judged. You also might want to do a search on graduating or backwards mapping. Backwards mapping is a particularly good way of making sure you're going to get done on time. And we also have some articles on how to polish your writing. This on-demand video of things you need to do to ace your final defense or viva. If you are a PhD and going into a formal defense, be sure you watch that. It sets you up with how the examiner thinks, what they're looking for, and questions they might ask. And if you are stumbling in any part of this, this particular book was written to help you not stumble. So if you want to know what goes where and how it all goes together and all the little bits and pieces, this is a good resource. Thank you for watching. Pick up the PDF, and best of luck in your final master's or dissertation work.